how the feast days of Great Lent, in fact, the feast days throughout the whole year, are not something that is randomly put together over the years, but has a distinct and definite theme which is there to aid us to seek salvation of our souls. Last week this began with a very strong pointed teaching about the fact that Christ had become truly man, that God had become truly man, which was a miracle in itself. And from then on, the rest of Great Lent, we continue to see how these sorts of things are manifesting themselves to consolidate with into our own hearts this truth about God becoming man. Today, for example, when we commemorate St. Gregory Palamas, we have a saint who showed in his real life the sort of transfigured life that one can obtain if they keep God's commandments. If you read his life, you'll see that there was all sorts of controversies about things like prayer and fasting and in general about aspects of the church. For example, the fact that one could not obtain deification here on earth, but it was reserved for the world. Gregory, in his writings and in the things that were given to him by the Lord, put all that aside and showed that indeed by struggling, by prayer, by fasting, a person can obtain an aspect of deification where they become truly Christ-like, and the miracles that the birth of Christ brought to us brought with that power for us to be able to do those sorts of things. For this he was obviously persecuted, like most of the saints. What is new in that? You should have a look at his writings. They are very exalted, but in a few short words, he explains, for example, how if a person immerses themselves in prayer, particularly the Jesus prayer, keeps the Lord's commandments, becomes like a miracle worker themselves and is able to perform great works, like Christ said, that you may have seen me do certain things, but you are going to do even greater things than these in your lives. And in this respect, he stands in the church as one of those that put to the side the purely like materialistic or human aspects that we do when we're in the church. Whilst all those things are good, those ascetic efforts for us, because they strengthen us in various ways, they don't necessarily improve your spirit, because you need to do more than that to obtain holiness and righteousness in your soul. And St. Gregory showed that that can be indeed done in our times. We know, for example, not so long ago, when I say not so long ago, a couple of 100 years ago, Saint Seraphim of Sarov also showed exactly the same thing with his friend Montevilov, when they were talking about spiritual things And Montevideo asked him about this aspect of Christ's likeness, which we call deification, and how it's obtained. And when Montevideo looked at Seraphim, he saw that Seraphim was shining with great light. They were sitting in a reasonably dark forest during winter. And it showed that here on earth, those sorts of things are available to people like you and I, if we are prepared to actually struggle for that sort of salvation. And many other saints through the centuries have exhibited these sort of miraculous things. Not only those that are seen by the eye, but felt by the heart and known by the things that these people say. Prophetic things, things about futures, pasts, presents, both in general and specifically about a person that they might be talking to. As a bishop, he exhibited this and concentrated on this. And in our modern times, we try to seek people like that in our lives so that we too can be sort of strengthened in the knowledge that this does exist. Instead, what do we find? You go to many of the Orthodox churches today and they are empty, even in major Orthodox countries. You talk to the bishops there, if you can get hold of them, and their answers are usually, look, I'm too busy, I have to administer all the things that have been given to me. And we call them administrators, organisers. And really they have nothing to do with the path of salvation. You have to realise that the early church had to go underground into the catacombs where they buried people into the walls, and they would then paint an image of them. That's why we have this sort of decor in the church. It's as if this person is actually buried in a catacomb right there. Okay? And they did not care about all this organisational stuff. Being hidden from the world, it was not necessary for them to succumb themselves to that. No matter what the law outside was, and it was a harsh Roman law at that time, and Christians were persecuted, just as now there is like a tidal wave coming upon Christians to persecute them as well, and force them to remove their crosses, force them to accept graciously all the heresies that exist in the world and all the wrong teachings, and make laws that if you say anything against it, you can be jailed or fined or whatever. Right now we are in the process of helping a family where the child was told to remove his cross, which is rather odd. And his father gave him a little cross, a small one to wear, and they are forcing him to remove that. Well, what's that got to do with them? Absolutely nothing. You know, if I want to wear something like that, it's not even seen, then that is my business and not anybody else's. And schools especially are not in the business of doing those sorts of things. I wonder sometimes in this modern world, what use are these schools anyway? I know of quite a few people that actually don't go to school as such. They study at home, not necessarily the curriculum that is laid out, but something better, more interesting. And when it comes to them sitting for those major exams where they determine their future academic life, if that's the way they want to go, then they make sure that they strengthen themselves in that curricula and learn that on top of all the other things that they have learned. Homeschooling, which is allowed and is popular in some countries, allows one to do that. But of course, it's a strain upon the rest of the family because somebody has to be guiding them as well. Many of the bishops that we lived under were truly holy men. Whenever you met them, say you were a great sinner and you'd done something terrible, these bishops would love you nevertheless and hug you and say some kind words to you and exhort you to do things which will get you out of that bind that you might have got yourself into. But I think the majority today that we see, especially in the West, care very much about how much money flows through the church coffers, how much glory they might obtain either from their own flocks or from the world. And they have no qualms about judging or criticising or gossiping about others whom they feel jealous about, who may have done something Christ-loving, but they have not done anything like that themselves. In other words, we are in a period that is asking us to be very careful with whom we attach ourselves to in this world and whom we listen to. Perhaps some of you in the past have been given an obedience by a holy person to do something. And that person may have died, but the obedience that you have been given lives on because it has not been removed. And a new living bishop or whatever cannot come along and tell you to drop all that and do what he wants. That is not the Orthodox way. Because until you fulfill that obedience, you're obligated to that. And that person that gave it to you is praying for you and helping you in obtaining that which was the aim of that particular obedience that was given to you. What I'm saying to you, I guess underneath, is that a time may come, perhaps sooner than later, that we too might have to seek out bishops that will love the work that we are trying to do. Not only the work on ourselves, which is the first thing, but the work to assist others in their path to the heavenly realm. Because those sort of people seem to be always very hard to find. They are there, and quite often they have very little authority amongst their peers in order to behave in that way because they are considered as being sort of weak or not part of the brotherhood or whatever they call themselves group of the other bishops with whom they communicate. And that's not only in one jurisdiction, but it goes across jurisdictions. Like the jurisdictions work with each other to sort of point out certain individuals from here or there and anywhere whom they dislike for some reason. I don't know what. Mostly because these individuals are doing something godly, whereas they, the critics, do very little except increase their bank accounts and install within their organisation comfortable life and the interests of living essentially a worldly life rather than a life of prayer and fasting and of the guiding of souls in truth. I don't know whether you hear in any other jurisdiction the truth, for example, about how man came to be, what happened to him, about the wrong teachings that science, what they call science today, brings to us and forces down the throats of young children who yet have not the discernment to fight against that. And therefore the task that lies before us is extremely hard. It's unto life or death, because it's very easy to lose a child who picks up on worldly things because they get the praise and the honours from the worldly teachers and guides that they may be in contact with at the expense of obtaining the truth that their parents or the priests or the bishops might be telling them. It's a very difficult thing. This person that has this issue with the cross actually resulted with police being involved even, to that extent. And whether that will create a record for the rest of his life or not, I don't know. But if it does, think about it. You have a record that you confessed Christ, and don't look upon that as some horror. This was very common during the communist period. If you accidentally called somebody Господин Radu, you would be penalized. Because I would say to you, there's no Gospodi there, there's no God here. You had to call him Tavarish Radu. And that was similar through all those communist countries. Today we too are not really allowed to talk about God or debate openly all the sorts of things that we see happening. As you know, there was this murderous run in New Zealand a week ago. And okay, that's wrong to kill and maim and lame, no matter who it is. But the spiritual nature and philosophy behind all that, we should be able to talk about openly and in truth. Because although we may feel that was a very wrong act, at the same time you understand that these people were not in the true church. They were not recognizing the true God. In fact, I don't even know what their God is. Is it a he? Is it a she? Is it a nit? What is it? Some cloud or whatever. I hope you understand what I'm saying. We were lucky in our lives to have several bishops that taught in a totally different way, particularly to us sinners. It was always in a gentle and a kind way, but firm if necessary, and explained what errors we might have and how to correct them. But never would they gossip to anybody. Never would they make a big deal about it or put a person down. Because if a person of that rank puts somebody else down, pretty much the chances are that they will lose that person insofar as being a churchgoer or anything like that. So I'm just giving you a bit of a warning sign that in due course, perhaps, I don't know, I hope not, we may have to seek other places to be looked after by God-bearing bishops, God-fearing bishops, true theological bishops, and not those who seek glory, wealth, and all those sorts of things that come. When I think about it, I see so-called church meetings of clergy, etc. There's nothing more than a business meeting. It's no different. Basically, the subjects are the same. There's never a mention on how are we going to, or what are we going to do to increase the spirituality of the people that come to us. There's never that question talked about. It's how much money can we raise over the next 2 months? I will start a basketball club or something, or we'll sell some cakes baked in the form of crosses or something like that. You know, it's along that line. Or the best one that I ever heard was dinner dances. Friday night was always a dinner dance in the church hall. What is a dinner dance? I assume it's sitting down, eating, and getting up and dancing, and then sitting down and eating and getting up and dancing, and paying, I don't know, $50, $100 of that for that privilege. And what has that got to do with our salvation? Don't forget, it was the dance that cut the head of St. John the Baptist off. They were having a dinner dance. There it was. And that should be the example to show to people what those sorts of things lead to. You cannot serve Christ in those ways. You cannot. To serve him requires a degree of letting go of your prideful life, a degree of persecution, a degree of hardship. Because that's the only way that you can chase away the evil that lives within you and the evil spirits that try to get you. And that they no longer teach. They do not teach that, as far as I know, in the West, probably in the Eastern, most of the Eastern churches as well. Because when I went there last year, they were mainly empty. And they were not little chapels like this. They were massive halls, beautifully done, beautifully decorated. I think the people from catacomb Christianity in the early centuries would have said, we're not in church at all. But in some other palace or something. And yet very few go there. So there is your obedience, not directly from me, but from our spiritual fathers, that not only must we work upon ourselves to become or strive to become Christ-like, but to inspire others in that truth. And if they have done something, if they are sinful, and we are all sinful, much more than we think we are. That's one of the biggest stumbling blocks. We don't realise that we are much more sinful than we think we are. And therefore that aspect of repentance, of close examination of ourselves, stands at the primary point in our lives. Once you start to see that, once you start to grow in that, then you have the authority to help others also in similar and other things. But until one fixes themselves or strives to fix themselves up, the work and the energy and whatever that's put into that is in vain. And the time that God gives you on earth is wasted. And let's face it, we all waste a lot of our time in various ways. If only we could, during those periods that have been given to us, to have done the right thing. The older ones of us possibly are already reflecting on their life, the past, and seeing key aspects of where was I wrong, where did things maybe change for me, who helped me in that change, where am I at now, am I bringing forth true fruit for Christ, or am I still on the same sinful path that I was on before? May God help us in this. Gregory Palamas confirmed the truth of the miraculous deification of humans after the previous Sunday when we had the feast where Christ took on humankind. Soon we'll be talking about the cross and what that is about St. John of the Ladder, who also, in a similar way to St. Gregory Palamas, gave us directions in life, but he did it in a different way. He did it by observing. His life was full of observations of people's behaviour, and from that he was able to work out like a system of how one sin leads to this one, and this one leads to this one, and this one to that one, like a flow chart, just by observation and prayer. And of course, Mary of Egypt, who brought her repentance through extreme bodily, spiritual hardships, living in the desert for decades, and begging God to forgive her for all her sins. A bit like that in that movie, if you've seen it, The Island, where the man who thought he shot his best friend went off and continually prayed for forgiveness because he killed somebody. And those of you who have seen it will know that in the end, God revealed to him that indeed he did not kill anybody at all, but the Lord allowed him to struggle like that to obtain that holiness, and indeed he became holy. God help us, preserve and protect us in all things. Amen.